June 26, 1970. The San Francisco Chronicle received yet another letter from the unidentified Zodiac Killer. He was already a year and a half into his reign of terror. He attacked 7 people, leaving only 2 survivors. Was he responsible for even more murders? He stopped giving details of the killings and claimed he would disguise them as robberies, killings of anger, and accidents. And his self-reported kill count was up to 10. In this new letter, his kill count went up to 12, and he tried to take credit for shooting a man sitting in a parked car with a .38. The man may have been San Francisco policeman Richard Radidich, who was shot and killed a few days before as he sat in his patrol car writing a ticket. He was only 25 years old. At the time, police doubted Zodiac's claim because they already had a suspect for the slaying of the young policeman, an ex-convict named Joe Allen Wesley Johnson. Charges against him were eventually dropped, however, due to a lack of evidence. The murder of Radidich remains unsolved to this day. In his letter, Zodiac claimed he killed the parked man to punish the people of the San Francisco Bay Area for not wearing Zodiac buttons, a demand he made in the Dragon card 2 months prior. But he ended the letter with something else, his 4th cipher puzzle, a collection of 32 symbols known as Z32, along with a map with a hand-drawn target on Mount Diablo. Zodiac's instructions for this are, the map coupled with this code will tell you where the bomb is set. You have until next fall to dig it up. His letters included bomb threats for several months now, even including instructions and diagrams. Did he ever make his bomb, his so-called death machine? 55 years later, we still don't know what this Z32 cipher says. Does it really tell where he planted his bomb? People have tried for decades to decode the message, including Dr. Ryan Garlick, a computer science and engineering professor from the University of North Texas. He was also my co-star on The Hunt for the Zodiac Killer. He's hot on the heels of episode 23, where he gave an interesting decryption of Zodiac's 3rd cipher, and he's got something new for you, his possible solution for Z32. He put together a great presentation, and I'm excited for you all to check it out. After his talk, I'll give my thoughts about his solution. As before, let me know what you think in the comments, or shoot me an email. Maybe you've learned some cryptography and took a stab at the cipher yourself. There are so many ways to learn skills related to cryptography, and one of the best is Brilliant, a learning app full of hands-on problem-solving lessons. To understand cryptography, you need some math. Brilliant helps you build your math skills from the ground up with fun, interactive lessons that feel like little games. Way more effective than just watching lecture videos. Learning to code? Programming skills are essential to code breaking. Brilliant has you covered there too, with interactive lessons to help you think like a programmer. Brilliant helps you become a better thinker and problem solver with thousands of visual, interactive lessons in math, science, programming, data analysis, and AI. To learn for free on Brilliant, go to brilliant.org/DavidOranchak, scan the QR code on screen, or click on the link in the description. Brilliant's also given our viewers 20% off an annual premium subscription, which gives you unlimited daily access to everything on Brilliant. Alright, now let's get settled in and check out Dr. Ryan Garlick's presentation about Zodiac's mysterious 32-character map cipher.
Hi, I'm Ryan Garlick, and this is a presentation on some interesting observations on the Zodiac Killer's map cipher or bus bomb cipher that Zodiac says will give us the location of a bomb that he supposedly planted in the San Francisco Bay Area. This cipher is also known as the Z32 cipher because it contains 32 symbols. First, a little background. I'm a clinical professor of computer science at the University of North Texas, and I've been working on Zodiac codes and ciphers for several years. I was part of the code team on the History Channel's Hunt for the Zodiac Killer. This is me on the show after 8 hours of filming and just before a bathroom break. So let's dive into what could be the solution to the Zodiac's map or bus bomb cipher. This is an incomplete timeline of the Zodiac case, and focuses on the pieces relevant to Zodiac's claims to have placed a bomb somewhere in the Bay Area. We're going to jump a few weeks after the Zodiac attacked Darlene Ferrin and Mike Mageau at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, California. On July 31st, 1969, Zodiac mails his first cipher, known as the 408, along with letters to 3 newspapers. Zodiac mails very similar letters, taking credit for the attack at Blue Rock Springs to 3 newspapers. Each newspaper also received a different part of what we call the 408 cipher. Zodiac's first of 4 ciphers. What we are looking at here is part of the letter that accompanied the cipher sent to the San Francisco Chronicle on July 31, 1969. Zodiac demanded that the cipher be printed in each of the 3 newspapers, or he said he would go on a kill rampage. The newspapers complied and printed the cipher pieces. This desire to terrorize through publicity is something that permeates almost all Zodiac communication, and I think we'll see this influence on Zodiac's mindset later. We know that Zodiac carefully follows his press. Zodiac writes numerous times to newspapers and replies to news stories written about him. Let's take a look at the cipher pieces that accompanied each letter. These are the different parts of the cipher mailed to the 3 newspapers. They weren't labeled Part 1, Part 2, and Part 3, so they had to be put in order by trial and error as part of the decoding. Less than a week later, high school teacher Donald Hardin and his wife Betty had cracked the cipher. So after many hours of work, Donald and Betty Hardin discovered this key. Now we know which symbols in the cipher represent which English letters. And when we put the ciphers in the correct order and apply the key, we get a message. And I've reproduced the first part, which famously reveals the message, "I like killing people because it is so much fun." It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. Notice how many transcription errors there are. We don't really know if these were mistakes on Zodiac's part, or if he did this intentionally to make decoding the message more difficult. Both of the solved ciphers have these transcription mistakes. For now, let's remember that we have this key on the left, and that Zodiac ciphers require a little cleanup, because we're going to use both of those pieces of information later. Let's go back to the timeline. Then, about 2.5 months after the first cipher, on October 11, 1969, Zodiac kills cab driver Paul Stine in San Francisco. This would be the last confirmed Zodiac murder. Just 2 days later, Zodiac mails a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle that includes a piece of Paul Stine's bloody shirt. Let's look at this letter in detail. Zodiac mails a letter to the San Francisco Chronicle taking credit for the Stine murder, and he thoughtfully includes a piece of Stine's bloody shirt, so we know he's telling the truth. Zodiac was almost caught right after this crime, and he was likely even stopped by a passing police car. He characteristically taunts the police about this, and includes an ominous note at the bottom. "School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." This information leaks to the public, and there is panic. Police cars follow school buses, and officers even ride along on some buses. This is the kind of terror that Zodiac seems to crave. This is the first, but not the last threat that Zodiac would make to school buses. Let's go back to the timeline. About 3 weeks later, Zodiac mails the infamous 340 cipher, again writing to the Chronicle. This cipher was solved 51 years later in 2020. Let's look at the details, as they may give us some clues to the construction of the later map cipher that we're going to focus on. Now it's November of 1969, about 3 weeks after the school bus threat, and Zodiac mails this 340-character cipher. This cipher is known as just the 340 or the Z340 because it has 340 symbols. It's a 17 by 20 grid of symbols that resisted decoding for 51 years until Dave Aranchak, Sam Blake, and Jarl Van Eyck solved it and gave us this key. The solution was like the 408 cipher before it, in that each symbol stood for an English letter. There are more than 26 symbols, so more than one symbol is used to represent some letters. This also made it harder to solve. For each symbol in the cipher, we find it in this table and substitute the green English letter for each occurrence of that symbol. Let's apply this key to the 340. When we apply the key to the cipher and read left to right, we get Iron Ka Uir Gertmal. This doesn't make a lot of sense until we realize that we need to start at the top left and go over 2 symbols and down 1 to read it. And the solution starts, "I hope you are having fun." It wraps back around when you get to the right edge of the paper. I'm going to leave the details of this solution to Dave Aranchak's excellent videos on the topic. Here's something interesting. The envelope this cipher came in had "Please rush to editor" written on the back at an angle down and to the right. Was this a clue to the deciphering? Over the next month and a half, Zodiac would send 2 more letters, and they also had messages on the back of the envelope that were written down and to the right. Then, when a new cipher came out, he switched back and just wrote editor straight across the back of the envelope. Some other things stick out here. In addition to this down 1 and over 2 transposition, the cipher is also broken up into different sections that have different reading orders. We don't have to do the down 1 and over 2 shift to see a message here. Life is death. This little message from Zodiac is like a bad fortune cookie. You know, I'd be disappointed if I got this fortune after my orange chicken. And there's a bit more. We also get these words at the bottom. We don't do the down 1 and over 2 move here, but some of the words are backwards. Notice that this also starts with life, spelled backwards as Ethel. We have a word-by-word reversal of some of the words here. When we reverse some of these words, we get "Life will be an easy one in paradise," with Zodiac's consistently unique spelling of paradise. So we have 2 messages here that start with the word life. When we decode the full message, somewhere in the middle, we get this. I'm showing you this part to illustrate again that there are many mistakes or flipped letters or corrections that have to be made. The 340 and the 408 before it did not produce the cleaned up versions that we see in the news. The raw decoding has several mistakes, and we do not know if this is intentional or if Zodiac is introducing noise to make the ciphers more difficult to solve. Cleaned up, this is sooner because I now have enough slaves to work for me where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise. I mentioned that the solution to the 340 here was going to have parallels to the later map cipher. Let's remember these things for later. 1, we have the bad fortune cookie life is death message. 2, another message about life with some word-by-word manipulation. Let's remember the Ethel. Zodiac has given us 2 messages here, both starting with life. Zodiac solutions require making some letter corrections, and lastly, envelopes may hold some clues. I'm going to come back to this box later in the presentation. Okay, back to the timeline. Zodiac is very active during this period, and the next day he mails yet another letter to the Chronicle, this time describing a bomb that he's building. He calls it his death machine. Zodiac now says he was just messing with us earlier on shooting out the tires of a school bus, and if we believed him, we deserve to have holes in our heads. A serial killer may have lied to us. But look out, Bay Area, he has a bomb. Zodiac describes an ANFO bomb in his letter, ammonium nitrate and fuel oil. He even gives us his shopping list. Zodiac's bomb diagram has a trigger mechanism, such that once a timer is in the right position, if a light beam that reflects across the street is broken, bombs on the side of the road go off. Let's look at how this bomb is supposed to work. You see, Zodiac is going to set up a flashlight on the same side of the road as the bombs. It will need to be aligned with a mirror and not moved by the weather. The flashlight will probably need to be elevated to get the angles just right, and if it moves at all, the bomb would actually go off the next time the timer is in position, even if there are no cars on the road. Then he's going to have a perfectly aligned mirror on the other side of the road, shining into a light sensor back on the first side of the road with the flashlight. If the mirror is misaligned and the timer is up, it goes boom. But you see, the mirrors and the sensors are so well aligned that the beam will only be broken when a large vehicle like a school bus passes through. Cars can go through safely. No word on delivery trucks or other tall vehicles. Then there is a timer. If the timer is in the right position when the flashlight beam is broken, then the 5 18-inch cardboard tubes containing the bombs along the side of the road will go off. He has painted these black so you won't notice them. Okay, back to the timeline. Now let's move forward in the timeline. A few months later, in April 1970, Zodiac mails the "My Name Is" cipher, along with his plan for a new and improved bomb. Maybe Zodiac realized that the last one was a little overcomplicated. Zodiac mails the 13-character "My Name Is" or Z13 cipher, along with his new and improved bomb diagram. This is a tantalizing cipher. Maybe Zodiac gave us his name. I have another video on this cipher. It's Let's Crack Zodiac episode 23. I would recommend checking it out, as there are parallels in how I believe each long cipher's key may have been used to decode each short cipher. Zodiac now tells us that his last bomb was a dud. But don't stop being afraid. He has a new and improved bus bomb. This one uses the sun instead of a flashlight, and has a cloudy day disconnect, for safety. Again, no mention of how only school buses are going to set this off, as opposed to any tall vehicle. But I guess this time he only needs to excavate one side of the road. Keep in mind at this point, none of these bus bomb details have been released to the public. Zodiac has been making these intricate drawings and he is getting 0 scare value. Let's head back to the timeline to see what he does to change that. Just 8 days after the new and improved bomb diagram, Zodiac mails the Dragon card. The public still only knows about the first threat to shoot out a tire on a school bus, and Zodiac, always craving publicity, demands that he get some attention in the newspapers. Let's take a look at the details. Zodiac sends the Dragon card to his favorite newspaper, the San Francisco Chronicle, where he talks about his blast again. Zodiac needs some attention, so he says, "If you don't want me to have this blast, you must tell everyone about the bus bomb with all the details." This is an interesting peek into Zodiac's psyche. He doesn't say, "Give me $1 million." He just wants to terrorize and get publicity. Keeping this bus bomb threat going as long as possible will also maximize the scare value. A few days later, Zodiac gets what he wants, and San Francisco Police Inspector Bill Armstrong gives a press conference to announce the bomb communication from Zodiac, in hopes that this will prevent something bad from happening. If a bomb did go off and the police didn't warn everyone, that would not be a good look. You can watch the video at this link. Armstrong looks pretty pissed off. Zodiac is finally getting some recognition for all of his hard work. And then more newspaper articles come out, noting that this lack of information had been suppressed, and that Zodiac seemed to be angry at the lack of notice. And it works. Zodiac gets to bask in the general chaos he has created, even if the police are likely a bit skeptical at this point. Someone calls in a bomb threat to a Kmart, twice, claiming to be Zodiac. I guess Zodiac just doesn't appreciate good deals on home furnishings and apparel. Luckily, there was no bomb at the Kmart. Back to the timeline. Now it's 2 months later, and Zodiac might be a little upset that there is not more panic and chaos about his bomb. The Bay Area is not properly terrorized, so what better way to rekindle the fear than a new map and a new cipher of where Zodiac says the bomb is planted? Let's dive into the map and the letter that we're going to focus on. Zodiac mails this letter and a Phillips 66 road map of the Bay Area. Zodiac has drawn a compass rose centered around Mount Diablo, with the note that 0 is to be set to magnetic north, which is different from the geographic North Pole. This would shift our angle about 16 degrees to the east if we were in San Francisco in 1970. The magnetic North Pole is always moving, and as of 2025, it's around 1,500 miles from where it was in 1970. Note at the bottom just above the cipher that the map coupled with this code will tell you where the bomb is set. And we supposedly have until next fall to dig it up. So all we can do is wait for the police to find it. Let's look more in depth at this cipher and map. This cipher is hard. It's short and it has very few repeating symbols. Only 3 of the 32 symbols appear twice, and the rest of the symbols are unique. As we'll see, this message can encode almost anything. In a letter exactly 1 month later, we get a hint from Zodi that the Mount Diablo code and the drawing on the map concerns radians and numbers of inches along the radians. Radians are an alternate way to measure an angle. 360 degrees is 2 times pi radians, or we can say there are 6.28 radians in a circle. This hint implies to me that if we decoded this cipher and just got some sort of numbers, we should know that those numbers refer to radians or an angle measurement, and the number of inches we should go along that angle from Mount Diablo to get the location on the map. This is after we adjust 16 or so degrees to the east for magnetic north. No bomb or death machine or anything seemingly planted by Zodiac has ever been found. Even if we were able to match up magnetic north, somehow settle on radians and inches from the cipher, and then draw a spot on the map to search, the area inside the 0 at the top of the compass Zodiac drew is roughly 75 acres. As we will see, I think this was the point. We were never meant to find anything, just to search forever and be properly terrorized the whole time. If you're starting to get a little skeptical about Zodiac's bomb, well, you aren't alone. Remember how he told us if we believed he was going to pick off the kiddies on the school bus that we deserved to have holes in our heads? The police may not believe Zodiac's bomb plots, so he ups the ante to continue getting attention with a map of where he planted it. And if this map can point to anywhere in the Bay Area, well, all the better for Zodiac. And we get more copycat Zodiac bomb threats. This fake Zodiac threat to a Southern California homeowner demanded $1 million. The resident apparently went about his day without withdrawing the cash, though, and thankfully no bomb went off. Zodiac tells us that his bomb is massive. I just don't think Zodiac was out dressed up as a Pacific Gas and Electric worker, digging holes for his bombs and lining up mirrors and flashlights and getting the angle just right on the light sensor. The police didn't either. In fitting with his psychology, I think Zodiac's goals were 1. Get as much publicity as possible. He didn't say, give me $1 million or I'm going to set off a bomb like the prankster. He said, tell everyone about the bomb or I will set it off. His goal was publicity. 2. Terrorize as many people as possible. He has mentioned the bomb in his last 5 letters. And 3. He wants to keep this bomb ruse going as long as possible, while in the end letting us know he had the upper hand all along. Could there be a rock he painted with his symbol and haha and the map somehow leads us to the 75 or so acre parcel that had that rock? Sure, but nothing like that was ever found. I think this is a big practical joke. Okay, enough background. Let's dig into the cipher. This cipher is too short and does not have nearly enough repeating symbols. It's almost a one-time pad. The only symbols that repeat are the C, the not filled in triangle, and the O. Every other symbol is unique, and consequently, it's easy to make this say whatever we want. The big question is, did Zodiac know this could represent almost anything? I think he did, based on his relative skill in cipher creation that we saw in the 340. But it could also be that he knew it could be almost anything, and it's meaningless, and he just wanted to waste the police's time. It could also be that he gave us the key previously, in one of the longer ciphers, but he obscured the message a little bit because he didn't want us to figure it out right away. Remember, I think he wanted everyone to be afraid for as long as possible, and then let us know that he is superior, he fooled us, and we deserve to have holes in our heads. When our only constraints are the 3 repeating symbols and the 32-character length, there are many, many possibilities when we get to make our own key. So maybe it was Zodiac messing with us. Zodiac liked calling the cops pigs, so maybe it was just a ruse. But I know what you're thinking. Zodiac sent us that hint a month later that the code represents radians and number of inches along the radian. And I'd like to think a serial killer wouldn't lie to us. So let's fill in things that could be radians and inches along the radian. 1 radian is 57.3 degrees, and radians are also frequently expressed in terms of pi, such as pi over 2 radians, which would be 90 degrees. When we get to make the key, we can make probably billions of solutions that have some mention of something that can be an angle, and something that can be a measurement along the angle. Here's one. But even if this is the right format, 2.7 also works. And how do we know that this is in number.number_rad format? It could be number point number radians, or just numbers, or something with pi. And if the solution has radians and inches in it, why would we need a hint telling us that? Here's one that I like from Lewis of Tokyo on Reddit. It makes some sense since it's just numbers. The hint basically says, if you get some numbers and you're confused, well, those mean radians and number of inches. So it makes sense that we would just have some numbers in the solution. Radians are frequently expressed with respect to pi, so this gives us another spot on the map. But just like before, other things work just as well. Pi over 6 4 3/4 also fits. So does pi over 5 1 3/4. I realize that some of these locations could probably be eliminated because they wouldn't fall within the map, or would be in the water or something like that. But Dave Aranchak created a software tool for the Hunt for the Zodiac Killer show, where you could pick any spot on the map, and it would fill in the cipher as needed. In other words, you can pick any spot on the map and then reverse engineer a cipher solution that would point to that location. You can use IN for inches, or inch, or inches, or just leave that off since the hint tells us it's in inches. You could use rad or radians or nothing at all. You can use 4 rad and 3 inches, or 4 rad by 3 inch, or 4 radians plus 3 IN, or any combination. You can make anything fit. Even better for Zodiac, right? An endless goose chase of terror. These are directions to everywhere, and we were never meant to find anything, just to search and be properly terrorized. But Zodiac knew that this fruitless search would come to an end someday. Maybe Zodiac was just being cheeky with us. I'm going to overdo it on the examples here to show you that without a known key, this cipher can be anything. Because, these are kind of fun. Here's another one. Again, I'm just making up keys on the fly. There is no bomb, I struggled with truth. I should stop all the bomb and kid jokes. Yeah, that'd be good, Zodiac. You can tell a whole story in unlikely Z32 solutions. Now Zodiac tells us, I made up that stuff about bombing them. Here's another fun one when I just get to make up the key. I left the bomb at the Vallejo City Hall. The nice thing about this one is that any 10-letter city works. I left the bomb at Riverside's City Hall. I left the bomb at Los Angeles City Hall, Sacramento. Or we can move out of California and alert the bomb squads in Alexandria, Birmingham, Charleston. You get the idea. For each of these, I'm just making up a key that fits the message I want the cipher to read. San Antonio is 10 letters. Zodiac wouldn't dare bomb the Alamo. But maybe Zodiac was out there lining up flashlights and mirrors and digging holes for massive bombs on the side of the road, and then making codes to try to give us the location where he hid a bomb so well that no one has ever found anything, even to this day. Or maybe he is trying to confess in the least efficient way possible and give us the location of his home address with a bomb in the basement. Or maybe Zodiac wanted to send us the location of where he was going to plant the bomb, so we could stake it out and catch it. But I agree with Zodiac here. I don't think any of these are likely. Yes, let's move on. So I hope you agree at this point that unless we have been given a key already, this cipher will never be solved without finding Zodiac's notes or tracking him down at the nursing home and taking the tennis balls off of his walker until he talks. But after creating the complex 340 cipher, I think he had to know that this cipher was unsolvable on its own. That is, unless he already sent us the key. Remember, we have two known keys from Zodiac to the much longer 408 and 340 ciphers. If we use a known key, things get much more restrictive and much more interesting. So we have two long ciphers and two short ciphers. I think the 340 is the key to the Z13 My Name Is cipher. And that's detailed in Let's Crack Zodiac episode 23. And the 408 may be the key to the map cipher. Let's see how this might work for the Z32 map cipher in the next slide. The method is similar for both. Here we have the key to the 408 cipher next to the Z32 cipher. Let's split the cipher out onto one line to make things easier to look at. The very first symbol, the C, does not appear in the 408. It only appears in the other long cipher, the 340. I think this may have been a ruse by Zodiac, using the first symbol to make us think the 340 key was the one to use. But I think the earlier long cipher, the 408, is the actual key. Remember, Zodiac can't make this too straightforward, or it would be solved very quickly, and we would know the map is meaningless. But I think he still wants to get a message out to let us know that he has the upper hand, and we should have holes in our heads for believing him again. I removed these C's. I realize that this introduces more degrees of freedom, but stay with me, as when we apply the 408 key, we're going to get a meaningful message. Let's take the C's out. Now let's apply the 408 key. There's no guesswork here. This is just substituting the symbols for the English letters in the key, using the same symbol-to-letter mappings as in the earlier 408 cipher. This also greatly restricts the degrees of freedom in the decoding. This looks like a hot mess, but look toward the end. Does that look a bit like Let It Die? We may be getting somewhere. But what about these symbols? They aren't in the key to the 408. I assigned the I symbol to the letter E, which is the same encoding as the 340. The upside down Aries, which was also one of the two unknown symbols in my other video on the My Name Is cipher, becomes a G, and I assigned the omega symbol to I. So let's fill in these letters. Let's also add some word spacers. Remember the message in the 340 that started with Eiffel? Now we have Eiffel. I think this is another message that starts with a scrambled version of the word life, but we still don't have a clear picture. We're going to rearrange the letters within each word or two adjacent words. This is anagramming, and I've been very critical of that in the past. But we are doing it only after applying the 408 key, and basically on a word-by-word basis, which is much more indicative of an intentional pattern. And we get life in waiting goes on by, let it die. One correction needs to be made, just as in my previous video on the Z13. This could be another example of Zodiac introducing one correction in a short cipher to obfuscate the solution. I think this correction is plausible, since X and Y would be next to each other on the key sheet that Zodiac may have been referencing, and he got one letter off from X to Y when he was making the cipher. This might be an actual transcription error instead of the familiar noise introduced by Zodiac in many of the other ciphers. I know anagramming introduces a lot of degrees of freedom in decoding, but what are the chances that we get another life and death message using a known Zodiac key with much more restrictive word-by-word anagramming? It also fits contextually, as Zodiac is basically telling us above the cipher that we just have to wait for the police to dig up the bomb. I mentioned earlier that we were going to come back to the things to remember from the 340 cipher solution. Similar to the 340, we have a bad fortune cookie message about life and death. It was Ethel, or life backwards, at the bottom of the 340, and now we have Eiffel, or life rearranged. We made one correction out of 30 symbols, but what about number 4? The envelope. Remember that Zodiac put messages on envelopes down and to the right for the next month and a half after the 340 cipher? And the 340 cipher needed to be read down and to the right? And remember that clue we got a month to the day after we got the map cipher? The envelope that hint was in had the letters in the abbreviation for California out of order. You had to anagram them. Was this a hint? I don't know. But keep in mind that Zodiac knew we had the 408 key for almost a year before this cipher was mailed. If this cipher used the 408 key, he needed to obfuscate the solution, or else the bomb gag was over. But what's going on with this atrocious spelling? Waiting and goes. They're both phonetically correct. They sound like waiting and goes. We didn't get any Q's or X's in there that would alter the phonetic meaning. And Zodiac frequently adds extra letters to words. But wait, Zodiac knows how to spell waiting. But 9 months later, he forgets. He uses an additional H like in waiting when he spells right. And then we have some off-the-wall spellings like disguise and entirely and suspicious. Here's another favorite. For a couple hours. Sort of a unique phrase that has 2 weird spellings in a row. And Zodiac knows how to spell control, forgets, and then remembers again, all in the same letter. Maybe we should take Zodiac at his word when he says he was leaving fake clues. It's easy to say that Zodiac is a bad speller, as this allows even more freedom in a deciphering solution. But I think it's a mistake to think that all Zodiac plaintext needs to be spelled perfectly and have no errors. That would be uncharacteristic. I've heard several people say he wouldn't make an error in such a short cipher. But it's my opinion that these are not errors, but either Zodiac's weird sense of humor or intentional mistakes to make deciphering more ambiguous and disguise his identity in the letters. But I understand that this statement means that we have even more possible outcomes for cipher solutions. An interesting side note, Zodiac says for a couple hours in the Kathleen Johns letter of 7/24/1970, and Arthur Lee Allen uses those exact words in a letter to a TV reporter. Let's go back to the timeline. I always try to be fair in the analysis, so let's look at some problems. The first counterpoint is that the My Name Is cipher is too short and doesn't have enough repeating symbols for meaningful analysis. This is true. But again, I would say that the cipher is too short by itself. I think Zodiac knew it was too short by itself based on his relative sophistication with cipher creation. We have to accept one of these outcomes. We use a known key and contextual clues, or find Zodiac's notes on an episode of Storage Wars, or we accept that this cipher is unsolvable. Of course, I can't prove that this is the correct solution, or that the 408 key was even used. I just think that applying the 340 key to the My Name Is cipher in my previous video, and now applying the 408 key to the map cipher in this video, and producing a meaningful Zodiac-like message with fairly minimal manipulation in both cases is a fairly strong coincidence. It may be indicative of someone who wants to hide a short message. If these messages were completely straightforward with no mistakes or manipulation using a known key, then why even bother to send them in cipher form? Zodiac knew at this point that we had the 408 key. If he made this cipher crystal clear in one step with the 408 key, the bomb hoax would immediately be over for him. Even using the 408 key, I can't prove that this solution is correct. I'm not saying this is it. I'm presenting some interesting observations for peer review. My assertion is that this is a possibility, but it is hard to say that one solution is more correct than another without the mathematical techniques that we can apply to the longer 408 and 340 ciphers. We can't do that with short ciphers. This solution introduces degrees of freedom by removing the C symbol, filling in the 3 non-408 symbols, and performing word-by-word anagramming. But if a known Zodiac key is used, this is a possible solution, and the number of possibilities drops significantly when we're constrained to a known key. I think the best case scenario for Zodiac is that he scares everyone for as long as possible. And later, when no bomb is ultimately found, Zodiac gets the upper hand and we realize that he sent a relatively meaningless message. That may be exactly what happened here. Again, there are going to be a truckload of word-by-word anagrams that can be made if we come up with our own key. As I showed, we don't even need to anagram to produce pretty much any message that we want, like, I left the bomb at the Vallejo City Hall. Dave Aranchak's software showed that any location on the map, any location, can have a corresponding angle and inches backfilled into the cipher. We cannot know the solution with the information that we have now. Before you drop the comment that the cipher can be anything with the method I used, here's my humble request. Provide an alternative example where the key is restricted in some meaningful way. My meaningful restriction was using the 408 key and only performing word-by-word anagramming. So be less restrictive. Maybe limit yourself to the 340 key or any key that isn't just made up. I know you can make a message if you also make the key. But have more than one correction. Allow full anagramming of the entire message. Does it produce a Zodiac-like message? Or is it word salad? Does it refer to life and death, or slaves in the afterlife, or paradise? Does it rhyme? If it sounds like Zodiac, please post it. I'm not saying your alternative has to rhyme to be meaningful, but doesn't that indicate more structure to a message? If there are millions of possibilities given decoding steps similar to mine, please indulge me with one example that has a restricted key and isn't word salad. If you just make up a key, the cipher can mean anything. I agree that the words waiting goes seem like a bit more wordplay than usual for Zodiac. Was this to disguise the message even further, so we didn't know the bomb plot was a ruse? Does it mean the solution's wrong? I don't know. We have examples like couple hours where Zodiac does back-to-back weird spellings. I think it's interesting that these still phonetically make sense, but I just don't know. So in summary, we have a Zodiac-like message. Life in waiting goes on by, let it die. This message rhymes and fits contextually. Using a known Zodiac cipher key. Some have said that a solution that uses a Zodiac key is no more meaningful than one that uses a key that we just made up. I respectfully disagree with that statement. Now, of course, we don't know that this cipher used a given key, but if it didn't, as I have shown, it can mean anything. The solution uses word-by-word anagramming, which may be indicative of more structure than no anagramming at all. I also only anagrammed after applying the 408 key. This solution follows Zodiac's methodology. It's a substitution cipher with transposition and correction, and it produced a remarkably similar message to the end of the 340, referencing life and death and using a similar word-by-word transposition. There are many solutions to the Z32 and Z13 ciphers out there, and a lot of them have an underlying assumption that Zodiac is trying to give his name or some other identifying information in code format. I just completely disagree that Zodiac wanted to give up or give his social security number in code. I didn't start with a known suspect's home address and then work backwards to manipulate the cipher to give me coordinates to that location. Zodiac could turn himself in any time he wanted. He chose not to, and I don't think for a second he wanted to give us any incriminating evidence in cipher form. He wanted to taunt, terrorize, and feel superior. But I do think he wanted the ciphers solved eventually. I believe that is why there was no incriminating evidence in them, and why I think there were efforts to obscure decoding with misspellings and transpositions so it would take longer. This message flows with Zodiac's life and death theme, and tells us that we should just let it die while we're waiting for the bomb to be found by the side of the road, because I think Zodiac knew it was never going to be found. I detailed a possible solution to the My Name Is cipher in Let's Crack Zodiac episode 23. That solution uses the key to the 340. Both potential solutions require filling in 2 or 3 symbols not found in the long cipher keys and making one correction. That both can produce contextually appropriate Zodiac-like messages using similar methodologies is a fairly strong coincidence. And Zodiac may have given decoding hints in his envelope messages. He rearranged the letters in caliph on his envelope that was sent with the hint to this cipher. So there it is. Not necessarily the solution, but some interesting observations on the Z32 cipher for peer review and discussion. This presentation built upon the work of many people on many websites, message boards, and forums, and there are many more than what I listed here. But I wanted to put some links up for further reading. Thanks for watching.
Okay, what do you think about Dr. Garlick's observations and his proposed decipherment of Z32? Is he on the right track? Leave your impressions and reactions in the comments. I'll give my thoughts. Here are some things I liked about his solution. I kinda like the rhyming, poetic result. Life in waiting goes on by, let it die. It sort of seems like something Zodiac would write. And he wouldn't really give a bomb location in his code, right? So I agree with Ryan's point that Zodiac won't give useful information in his ciphers, as we saw from the first 2 solved ciphers. I definitely agree that Zodiac liked to mislead people. He promised to give his identity in the ciphers, but the first 2 solved ciphers don't give any information. I'd expect the same broken promise in his Z13 and Z32 ciphers. No name and no bomb. The possible envelope hint is interesting. He wrote California the same way on most of his envelopes, abbreviating it as caliph, but his little list letter, which has the radians and inches hint for Z32, also has California misspelled on the envelope, CLAIF. Was this a hint that anagramming was part of the secret? Besides, Zodiac did put some word reversals in Z340, which looks similar to anagramming. Now for some points against Ryan's solution. I think he made a stronger argument for Z13 in episode 23. It's a shorter cipher, but much more constrained. Ryan makes a lot of good points, but you still have to accept that Zodiac reused a previous cipher key, something he hasn't been known to do before. Granted, we only have one data point. The Z340 cipher key has no known connection to the Z408 cipher key. If someone discovered a connection between the two, not only would that be super interesting, but it might help us understand how he might have made Z13 and Z32, and might further support Ryan's solutions. I still don't think it's necessary to restrict the key. For all we know, Zodiac kept things simple, and it's just a substitution cipher with a normal key. There's no guarantee that he knew such a key would produce too many plausible solutions, and thus would be compelled to reuse a previous key or add some other meaningful restriction. Even with simple substitution ciphers, you can use words or phrases to generate the keys, so in that sense you could restrict the key. What kinds of solutions for Z32 could we find if we tried to produce keys using words and phrases? What if they come from his own letters? Anagramming really expands the possibilities, but Ryan does constrain them to be within a word or two. It's still a lot more arbitrary than the transposition in the 340. The write 2 down 1 rule is pretty strict, but the word reversals in the last 2 lines was a little bit arbitrary. However, those are full reversals rather than word scrambles. Ryan challenged us to produce additional solutions for Z32 using the same restricted key.
Provide an alternative example where the key is restricted in some meaningful way. Does it produce a Zodiac-like message? If it sounds like Zodiac, please post it. Please indulge me with one example that has a restricted key and isn't word salad.
That kind of challenge is like catnip for nerds, so I ate it up and went to work. First, let's look at how his solution is constrained. He applied the Z408's key, which gives this partial plaintext. Some symbols are still unassigned because they aren't in that key. C appears twice, and Ryan leaves them blank. Then he assigns E to the vertical line, G to the upside-down Aries symbol, and I to Omega. Ryan does some anagramming and spelling corrections to get the final plaintext. Let's visualize all of this with an animation. First, some letters are removed so we can correct some misspellings. Then, some anagramming, but since Ryan limits them to words or pairs of words, notice that they don't move very far to their final positions. Finally, let's finish correcting the misspellings by adding the missing letters. Life in waiting goes on by, let it die. We can find other messages this way. Let's try different assignments for the non-Z408 symbols. We'll keep C blank, and we'll keep G for upside down Aries, but let's use F for the vertical bar and keep Omega blank. From now on, we will make our own assignments like Ryan does for the symbols marked in green. The rest matches the 408's cipher key as before. Now we can remove a few symbols, do some limited anagramming, then add the missing letters. It says, film if we hang on a post, bleed it. Could that be considered a Zodiac-like message? Here's another one. Change these assignments to L and T. I'll find 2 manholes and text. What's he saying there? If you look for the bomb, find 2 manholes with words written on or near them? How about this one? Evil is in hand or seen to be left adim. Sounds kind of poetic to me, contrasting the presence of evil with its fading. Fire in Donna, the good blast next. Is that referencing Donna Lass, the missing nurse from Lake Tahoe, who might have been a Zodiac victim? So all of those examples try to minimize the anagramming. Letters tend to move a short distance to their destinations. But if we remove that restriction, we can find perfect anagrams. A perfect anagram doesn't need any corrections of misspellings. Every letter is accounted for when moving to their destinations. Here's one that sounds very Zodiac-like. I win gun death. I rot bodies next fall. Here's another. I detox and will be fine with no gas. Is that referring to the gas chamber, like in the 340 cipher? Here's one signed by Arthur Lee Allen. I let infants die abroad now, Lee X. Maybe he gave his middle name Lee to be cheeky, but put X for his last name to keep the mystery going. So all of those examples use the 408's key applied to the 32-character cipher. That's one way to restrict the possible solutions. As Ryan says, if you allow any key, you can make the cipher say almost anything, since there are few repeated symbols and the cipher is so short. But couldn't we also restrict the key by applying the 340 cipher's key? What happens when we do that? The Z32 plaintext looks like this when we apply the 340's key. Only the Aries and Omega symbols are missing from the 340's key. Like before, we can find some perfect anagrams. If we make these assignments for Aries and Omega, we can find this message. Try to beg now, and pay for it in paradise. Definitely very Zodiac-like. Here's another one. I try a body 2 radians up in front page. Sounds like a mysterious reference to his radians and inches hint. And it reflects his obsession with the front page of the newspapers. This one references a victim. Adopt it for a dying person with Brian. Brian is in Hartnell? Is the dying person Cecilia Shepard? Here's a nasty sounding one. Grind of a pretty body part is in a town. Yeah, we could probably sell that as a Zodiac message. Admittedly, these examples allow full anagramming that isn't restricted to individual words. Could we find Zodiac-like messages from the Z340 key where only words or pairs of words are anagrammed, maybe with some misspellings? I think so. They're harder to find, but I'm sure they're out there. Anyone out there want to try? I think all these examples show that we can't be sure Ryan's solution is the correct one. Even with restricted keys and limited steps, we can find other messages. Do they sound more or less Zodiac-like than the message Ryan found? That's very subjective, but I think some of the ones I found are good candidates. But the point is that since we can find a lot more, they raise reasonable doubt that any particular one using this approach is the right one. Zodiac's 13-character cipher, if you assume that it uses simple substitution, has this many possible keys. That's 302,000 billion. It's roughly the same order of magnitude as the number of stars in the observable universe with its 2 trillion galaxies. By comparison, the 32-character cipher with its 29 unique symbols has this many simple substitution keys. That's 105 billion, a ridiculously large number. If it took you 1 second to look through the entire giant pile of possible keys for Z13, then at that rate it would take about 11 million years to examine every one of Z32's keys. And these numbers get much larger if you allow each key to have additional choices like anagramming or correcting misspellings. Since his first 2 ciphers were solved and had real messages in them, I think Zodiac put a real message in Z32. Will we ever know if we find it? I think the odds are against us. Unfortunately, it's easier to raise doubts about solutions to this cipher than to be certain. The cipher is too short, and there are too many messages that fit. Ryan makes compelling arguments for his discovery, but I think there are too many degrees of freedom, since other messages can be found the same way. But maybe one day, solutions that are hard to doubt will emerge, and we'll finally have some closure on these mysterious ciphers. What do you all think? Let us know in the comments. Do you have a Zodiac cipher solution? Feel free to share it. I might pick some to make videos about someday. Thanks for watching. As always, if you want to help out the channel, click the like and subscribe buttons, share the video, and check out the affiliate products in the video description. If you like the kind of code breaking we do on this channel, I highly recommend the book Code Breaking: A Practical Guide by Alonka Dunin and Klaus Schmey. It's jammed with great examples of codes and ciphers through history and gives you tools and advice for solving them. And check out these 2 books about the Zodiac Killer case by experts Michael Butterfield and Tom Voigt. Alright, thank you so much for your support and see you next time. Bye-bye.